Welcome to Behind the Law with Justin Clark, the show that takes you behind the law and answers your toughest legal questions.
Welcome back to another edition of Behind the Law. Justin Clark is here. We're going to continue our conversation of foreclosures, what you can do to try to stay in your home. There's a new law on the books. But as well, in another part of the program, we'll be talking to our special guest about how foreclosure, bad economic times, lend themselves to really hurting your child's self-esteem and what we need to do as a society to help these kids.
Because I get really sick, Rob, of hearing people come to me and say, Justin, what you're doing is bad. What you're doing to try to help people save their homes is bad. These deadbeats should be paying their mortgage. You know, it really upsets me. Let's be totally honest. I can't tell you the anger that I feel when people talk about my clients and the struggles that they're going through to try to save their homes, to try to work on loan modifications with some of these banks that take years and years, and they get jerked around and jerked around and jerked around endlessly, and now you're going to tell me that my client's a deadbeat because they lost their job and couldn't pay their mortgage. And I want Mark Merrow, who's a very famous guy around here, famous guy nationally, who's going to join us shortly, talk about how not only do these people want to save their homes and not be deadbeats, how this is even affecting their children, how going through a foreclosure or a bankruptcy, rendering someone homeless affects their kids. And we're going to talk about that here later in the show.
And the problem is much wider than most people in Central Florida think. Do you realize that we have whole sections of schools? There are whole groups of children who are going to school right now who are homeless. That means wherever they're staying, whether it be a shelter or a relative's house, or in the case of somebody who was helped by an organization right here, the Community Food and Outreach Center, some of those families were living in their cars, and their kids were just using a public bathroom in a 7-Eleven or whatever and changing into their school clothes. How would you have liked to have been them when you were in school? And the kids say, hey, let's go to your house and play right after school. Where are we going to play? In the 7-Eleven parking lot? I mean, I cannot imagine. So a lot of these foreclosures are not the fault of the person who either got behind or their wife may have lost their job, Justin, and maybe they just couldn't quite make it, or they fell prey to many of the problems that these banks are now having to pay for in these settlements, or they got there, and how many times did this happen in 04 and 05, where the family sat down, they wanted to live the American dream, and the person said, well, you know, you qualify for the $160,000 home, and I know that's what your payments could be, but, you know, if you just skip the McDonald's and the Starbucks, I can put you in for right now. I can get you in a $200,000 home.
Oh, yeah.
Overbought, and a lot of them have problems.
Who is profiting off of that? Who is profiting on, in 2006, telling my client that they can afford that $250,000 house when it was very clear they could only afford about $140,000. Who profited? My client? Absolutely not. It was the banks. And now we're in a position where my client can't pay their mortgage. And then you're going to tell me that my client's a deadbeat for not paying their mortgage? And let me tell you another thing, Rob. When my clients got in trouble back in 2009, 2008, 2010, they called the bank and said, bank, I can't pay my mortgage. What do I do? Sorry, Mr. Smith, we can't talk to you until you stop paying your mortgage. Miss 3 payments, and then we'll talk to you. So did my client was begging and borrowing from their family to pay their mortgage, but the bank wouldn't help them until they stopped paying. And now we're here. Now it's my client's fault because the banks are incompetent to help my clients in doing modifications for them to keep them in their house. But now we've got the market going up a little bit. And Rob, we're in a weird place now. Mm-hmm. The market has gone up some 30% around here in a year. It's crazy. But we have these hedge funds in town that are buying up all the inventory. So I have a lot of clients who are still struggling to stay in their house. They're in foreclosure. Now we've passed fast-track foreclosure measures in the court system here. But it's not too late. The rental market is very high. We still have some time. If you want to stay in your house, you know, maybe you got your job back, or maybe you've gotten a promotion since the time that you lost half of your salary. Now maybe the time is now to try to keep the house through a modification. I am seeing banks now do better modifications. Mm-hmm. And if you want to keep your house, I will urge you to try to do so, because go on Zillow.com and you're going to see that your house value is going up again. Mm-hmm. You know, for the last several years, every time you go on Zillow, you close your eyes, you don't want to see it. It's like seeing your credit score. You don't want to really see what's going on. Now you go on Zillow and you're like, my God, it's actually going up. So, you know, you're probably not as far underwater as you think. Now, it might be an artificial bubble. I don't know. We can talk about that later. But if you want to save your house, there are some fantastic programs out there to do so. Market is going up. Interest rates are on the rise. Doing a modification has nothing to do with the interest rates. It has everything to do with the amount of income you have coming in. Now is the time, if you want to save your house, to stay in that house.
We're going to take a short break, but before we go, are you struggling to make your mortgage payments? Refinancing your mortgage is an easy solution that could save your home, and Justin Clark has worked on hundreds of them. Just give the offices a call right now at Gregory and Clark. Call 321-282-1055, and a free consultation with Justin Clark will give you your options. We'll be right back.
Behind the Law is pre-recorded for TV, but you can ask your questions live on the radio Sundays at noon on News 96.5. And if you need legal advice right now, Justin's associates are standing by. Just give the offices of Gregory and Clark a call at 321-282-1055.
Ask your question live. Tune into FM 96.5 WDBO Sundays at noon and ask Justin your question.
But you're telling me, and I've seen it in today's society, that a person would call the bank and say, I can't make $950 a month, but I can sure make $800. That's not a deadbeat. That's somebody that's asking to tack on something to the end of a loan.
Stay tuned. Justin Clark will be right back with more Behind the Law. Welcome back to Behind the Law, the show that takes you behind the law and answers your toughest legal questions.
Let me go back to an original point that I don't think we've talked about in about 3 years, and that is the fact. Let me ask you a question. If somebody was making their payments and then they fell on hard times, maybe the wife was laid off or the husband just didn't get that extra hours he'd been counting on, or that bonus was taken out, or their 401k went south when the stock market went south. All right. But my premise is, let's say the bank payment was $950 a month. But you're telling me, and I've seen it in today's society, that a person would call the bank and say, I can't make $950 a month, but I can sure make $800. That's not a deadbeat. That's somebody that's asking to tack on something to the end of a loan. Hey, I'm wanting to pay $800, not $950. Can I do it? And then they say, miss the payments, and then, of course, their credit goes to heck.
90% of my clients, Rob, have never missed a payment on anything their entire lives. No one expected this recession, almost depression, that we have experienced over the last several years. No one, all of my clients don't come in and say, hey man, I'm trying to cheat the system. How can you help me screw over everybody here and get out free and clear? My clients wanted to get back on their feet. They would call the lender and say, lender, I can't afford $1,000, but how about I send you $700 for the next 4 months, and then I think I'm going to get my overtime back. That's not good enough. Stop making your payments for 3 months, then call us. And what happened? They called in 3 months, and now Dave doesn't work at the bank anymore. Now they're talking to John at the bank, and John has a whole different attitude and mentality. My clients want to pay their bills. You know, my clients are suffering. I also will tell you now the banks are getting a tiny bit better. Just a little bit better at doing these modifications, and now is absolutely the time if you want to save the house.
And the one thing is we have a great working relationship with another expert right here on the radio, and that's Robert Palmer. But he'll be the first to tell you, once you miss a payment, then you don't qualify for a lot of the programs like your HARP or your HARP Point 2, because you've got to be current on your payments to qualify for that. So it kind of put the homeowner in a rock and a hard place.
Well, the government came out with, there are several different programs, and people get them confused all the time. The HARP program, which is what RP funding can help you with. The HARP program is a refinance, meaning new money's coming in and paying off the old money. So we have a whole new mortgage. Whole new mortgage coming in, and you can even do it if you're underwater. But you can't have missed any payment on anything, basically.
But the bank told me to miss a payment.
It doesn't matter. The government doesn't care. But there's also what's called the HAMP program, H-A-M-P, which is a modification program, meaning there's not new money coming in to pay off the old money. We're just changing the terms of the existing mortgage, and this can absolutely be done when you are not current. Your credit means nothing in this. The only thing that really matters is the income you have coming in.
Now, what are your options now that the new foreclosure fast track bill has been signed into law by the governor? It was a very quietly passed bill. There wasn't a lot of publicity about this thing, but now that it is law, we have to know what the rules are. Interesting conversations heard right here week after week and seen on television as well. We'll be back with our special guest and a lot more right after this break.
You can find more Behind the Law on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gregory and Clark, where there's plenty of past episodes with valuable information on how to save your home from the mortgage companies. Check it out.
Ask your question live. Tune into FM 96.5 WDBO Sundays at noon and ask Justin your question. Stay tuned. Justin Clark will be right back with more Behind the Law. Welcome back to Behind the Law, the show that takes you behind the law and answers your toughest legal questions.
Hey, welcome back to the show. This is Behind the Law featuring Justin Clark of Gregory and Clark Attorneys at Law. The numbers to call if you want to join the conversation, 407-297-9696 or 855-297-9696. Our television audience on WRDQ TV 27 can see that we've grown from 2 to 3 on the panel for this segment of the show. And I'll ask Justin Clark to do us the honors and introduce our very special guest and a very good friend.
Thank you, Rob Newton. First of all, Rob, thanks for being here, as always, buddy.
Good to be here, man.
Mark Merrill, you've been on the show several times, man. And let me tell you how I first got to know you a little bit. We do a lot of school bullying type cases around the community where we represent parents whose children have been severely injured. We've seen deaths, unfortunately, because we do think the school systems have some sort of obligation to protect our kids. We put parents in jail if they don't send their kids to school, right? So there is some obligation there on our kids, on our school systems to protect the children. You're here for a little bit of a different reason today. Let me tell you why. We've done a lot of foreclosure work, bankruptcy work, and we've seen a lot of our clients fall on incredibly hard times. And I get sick and tired of hearing people talk bad about my clients for going through a tough time. And I know you've been around a lot of children who have gone through a lot of financial issues, and I know one of the main reasons I want to have you here today is you had a lot of financial problems yourself growing up, right?
Absolutely.
Give me a little bit of your background.
Well, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old. We lived in one of the worst drug and gang-infested neighborhoods in New York. I was brought up by a single family. My mom worked 2 jobs, and we went many times wondering where we were going to get our next meal. So I understand that what a lot of these young kids are going through today. But Justin, I've never seen anything like what's happening at our public schools today. I mean, I'm screaming from the rooftops, we are losing our next generation. When you pull up at a school and the principal pulls you aside and tells you that, 2 of our buses actually pick up kids at a local hotel because they've been removed from their home, it just breaks your heart. I grew up in a really bad neighborhood, but I had a home to go to every day. I can't imagine, I can imagine because I talk with these students all the time. But we are seeing kids going through isolation, loneliness, depression, being bullied or abused, cutting themselves, suicidal thoughts. And the parents are at their wits' end just thinking, what am I going to do? I don't have a place to take my kid. And they're wondering how they're going to pay their hotel bill.
Now, I know that you made it out of poverty. You actually made it, as you say in your presentation a lot of times. Well, tell us about your professional career a little bit.
Well, when I was a little kid, I always dreamt big. I mean, I wrote all my goals and dreams down as a little boy. And those goals, and a lot of them were material things because, when you're poor, I wanted a black Cadillac, I wanted a speedboat, but I wanted to be a millionaire. But I wanted to be a professional athlete. I was going to win Rookie of the Year my first year in pro sports. And fortunately, those dreams did come true. And I got myself out of that situation. I was able to buy my mom a house and do all these amazing things in life. But I also resorted to the things that took me down, and that's alcohol, drugs, making the wrong choices in life. And unfortunately, I lost my little brother and sister. They both died at 21. My mother died at 58. My dad died while I was holding him in my arms. So I can really relate to what a lot of these young people are going through. I have been to many of the funerals, as you have too, Justin, of young kids that have taken their life much too soon because of suicide. And it all stems because how we treat each other. Words kill, especially when a kid loses his home and goes to school and kids kid him about living in a hotel and mocking him, and kids are just at their end of the rope. But when you go home at night to a hotel, not knowing where your next meal's coming from, not knowing how long you're going to be able to stay in this hotel, not know where you're going from day to day. Could you imagine what that's like every day?
Further, Johnny, you'll chime in with this. I stay at a hotel every week when I come up here to do WDBO. This morning, I was shocked. Coincidence with this show? I don't know. How about a 5-year-old kid, still in his pajamas, getting on the 5th floor elevator? I looked over, couldn't believe my eyes. He goes down to the little continental breakfast they serve, got a banana and some yogurt, and sat all by himself in a hotel lobby eating breakfast.
It's his kitchen.
And so I talked to him, and I said, "Oh, your parents on vacation? You're gonna go to Disney?" How stupid was I? I live here. This is where my family lives.
Oh.
This is not a
What
bed
are you
and
gonna
breakfast,
do?
Rob. You know, this is real life. This is this kid's kitchen.
I mean,
And
I couldn't believe it.
The saddest thing, this is America.
Right.
This is what's happening. And if we think it's going to continue to get worse unless something is done. And that's why I'm saying, please, we have got to do something in our public schools. We have got to make a difference in our schools. This is our next generation. These are the kids that are going to be our future leaders. And if we're not doing something now, who's going to do it?
Stay tuned. Justin Clark will be right back with more Behind the Law. Welcome back to Behind the Law, the show that takes you behind the law and answers your toughest legal questions.
Now, if you haven't heard of Mark Mero, which you probably have, maybe they know you by a different name, and this is why the kids really look up to you. You know, when you go to make presentations at schools, I look at the kids, and some of these are tough schools, but I've been to your presentation, and I've really seen how these kids, their eyes light up. I even took my little nephew Anthony to one of these presentations one time, and he was like, "Justin, I just can't believe you know this guy." How do they know you?
Well, I was a former WCW and WWE wrestling champion. I wrestled the character Johnny B. Bad in World Championship Wrestling for 6 years. I was a 3-time World Television Champion. And then, of course, I went over to the WWE where I became an Intercontinental Champion. So a lot of kids that watch wrestling knew me from that. And but I've also been an advocate of the mistakes I made in professional wrestling, drugs and alcohol and steroids and all the things that I've taken down. And unfortunately, I've lost over 30 friends that most of them died from their bad choices. And that's why when I talk to kids at schools, my program is called Choices. We are defined by the choices we make in our life.
Now, back in the day when kids have problems at school, I find middle school to be maybe the toughest 3 years of these kids' lives. You might feel different, but this middle school period is crazy for these children. And, they watch the shows on television. They have all the popular kids there. Back in the day, you'd say, "Oh, just take it out behind the woodshed and deal with it as kids." Now I see children commit suicide. I see, maybe even more often, see the child being bullied kill the bully. And we see this all the time. But now, so going to school can be tough for these middle schoolers. But can you imagine going home and knowing that you might lose your house tomorrow, or you're in foreclosure and you're going to have a sale date on your house 2 weeks from today? How does that feel? How does that make these kids feel?
The stress level these kids are at, besides that, and then worrying about losing their home, it's beyond comprehension right now. Just one of the things that I'm seeing, which is really alarming me, obviously, is the suicide rate amongst young people now. It is now the third leading cause of death of kids that are I believe it's 12 to 18 years old now. I mean, third leading cause of death.
Unbelievable.
And, a lot of people don't know this, and I'm not here to pump Justin up. I'm so proud he's the sponsor of our program.
Thanks.
But because of kids that are at their wits' end, and parents that are at the wits' end of kids that have tried everything, going to the principal, going to the counselor, have tried everything to get the bully to leave him alone. Stop picking on him. Stop hurting him. Stop with the name calling. Stop with the Facebook posts. Stop picking on me. And the parents get involved and get meetings, and nothing happens. And they're at their wits' end, and then they hire someone like Justin Clark. But not only does he be an advocate for the family, but he eventually comes and brings these kids to my presentation where it is life-changing, and that's when we really, as a partnership, have really been able to make a difference in our community.
Have you had, because I've heard rumors of this effect, that sometimes you give such a dynamic presentation I'm hearing from some administrators around Central Florida that known bullies in the school have come up to you afterwards and said, I never looked at it that way. Help me to get right.
Even better than that, I got students that have been bullied by someone. They said, during your presentation, the bully that's been bullying me for the last 3 years passed me a note and said, I'm sorry, can we be friends?
Wow.
One of the greatest things that happened was at one of our last schools we did in Atlanta. There was a student who wrote to me and he said, the day you came to my school was the day I was going to shoot up the school. Not that I was going to kill kids, I was going to kill myself. Now, here's the amazing thing that happened. We get the school involved. The boy was incarcerated, and when the police interrogated him, they said, what stopped you from doing this? He had the access to the guns. His parents were with him. His mom was with him at the interrogation, and he looked straight ahead, and he said, the man that came to our school changed my life.
Unbelievable.
And that's just one incident of many kids that we have saved through our program.
Now, selfishly, of course, I want to keep you around Central Florida as much as we can because you do such a great job. But, I'm very happy to hear you're all over the nation now. How do local people, we have a lot of teachers, a lot of administrators of local school systems who listen to this show and watch this show. How can they get a hold of you? I mean, can they call you and say, hey, can you come speak at our school?
Call me at 407-862-4800. 407-862-4800, or like I said, go to our website, thinkpoz.org. And I live here in Central Florida, so if I didn't have to travel all the way to New York, I would love to do as many schools as I possibly could. We've done over 550 middle and high schools now through our program, and it's the #1 anti-bullying program we got going right now in public school.
Mark, what's a good question that parents listening right now can ask their kid when they go back to school in September and the kid comes home seeming a little weird? What do you say to your child?
Find out what's going on at your kid's school. Just be open and honest. Sometimes it's a matter of just laying down in a bed next to your kid, opening up a book, not saying a word. They're going to go, Mom, what's up? You go, I just want to know how you're doing. Talk to your kids. Find out who they're surrounding themselves with when they're not with you. If you're starting to see isolation, loneliness, depression, spending time by themselves or on the internet a long time, find out it's an opening cause of a problem in your family.
I've also heard from parents who say they learn more just driving the car and not eavesdropping, but listening to what's coming out of the back seat. The kids talking to each other sometimes reveal the most unbelievable things.
Thank you for watching Behind the Law with Justin Clark. Be sure to join us again next week as Justin takes you behind the law and answers your legal questions.